today. We even had to put up more chairs in the back, so thank you all for coming out. I think that might be an indication both of the subjects that we have here tonight, presentations about some of the businesses, early businesses in the county, as well as the presenters, well-known presenters that are always good to present interesting facts about our history here in the county. We'll begin tonight with an opening prayer. Don Childs will offer that, and then Chal Cook will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Kyle Singleton will be the presenter. Kyle is a fourth generation member of the Singleton family here in the county. He was born and raised in Ferron. He is the son of Sam and Alta Singleton, and very interestingly, he grew up in his great-grandfather's home, Samuel M. Singleton, that he built in 1896. And so that home still stands and is on the historic register. Okay, Bernice is telling me we need to speak up. I guess we'll need to get a little bit closer. Kyle went to Utah State University and got an engineering degree, or degree in engineering, civil engineering. He worked for a year in Cedar City as a civil engineer, and then a position came open here at the Hunter plant, and he transferred up here, and has been with the Hunter plant now for, 34 years?
35.
35 years. Kyle has been in charge of the waterworks here at the plant. They are receiving the water from the irrigation companies, the distribution of that, and the control of the water at the plant. One of the principal positions there in management at the plant. He's also a farmer, a rancher, which he's maintained throughout his life. And he and his brother Morris and his son Trevin continue to ranch in Ferron. And so he'll be presenting about his great-grandfather Samuel M. Singleton and the establishment and the development of the Singleton Store in Ferron. So Kyle, we'll turn the time to you.
Okay, I'm glad to be here. It's a little humbling to see everybody out there. So glad to see all the Ferron residents. If I say something that's not right, could you correct me? I'd like to say most of what I'm going to say tonight I've kind of got from two books. My dad helped put together this book. It's The Lives and Times of Our Singletons, the history of the Singletons. He put that together. And then this book, A Peach of a Place, the history of Ferron and Mullen, by Evelyn Huntsman and Roma Powell, put that together. So that's where I've got most of the information that I will be telling you tonight. And there's a lot more detail in the book than I'm going to say. So if you have access to these, you may want to take a look at that. And you see Samuel Singleton there, and here's another picture that was at the City Hall that I borrowed from them. So that's who we're focusing on tonight, is Samuel Singleton. Yeah. And I just wanted to point out I've got an old cash register or adding machine here that was found down in my dad's place, and I assume that was from the store, so I just brought that. You can come and look at that later on. So like I said, we'll be focusing on Samuel Singleton, which is my great-grandfather, and he's the one that started the store. But we need to know the history of him. How did he end up in Ferron? Got to get my notes in the right order here. So Samuel Singleton was the second son of John Singleton and Hannah Binns. And he was born November 9th, 1859 in American Fork. And that's where they lived, and he was growing up there. And John Singleton was a farmer and a rancher in the area, and he worked there in the American Fork area. And so this is his son, Samuel Singleton, which is my great-grandfather. So how did Samuel Singleton end up in Ferron? That's what we'll be talking about, and I'll tell you more about that tonight. So Samuel's father, John Singleton, and his brother, Alma, they went out on Christmas Eve of 1865 to gather wood to burn in the house to keep them warm. That's all they had was wood-burning stoves back then. And while they were out gathering wood, it was a snowy blizzard night. And they'd filled the wagon with wood and were headed back. And there was blizzard was so bad, they got off the road, off the trail, and drove onto a pond. I believe it was called Molnar's Pond. And the oxen in the wagon broke through the ice into the pond. And so now, what are they going to do? They were able to unload the wood and get the oxen to pull the wagon out, but in so doing, of course, they're going to get wet. And well, from this activity in the night, we went into the night, John Singleton froze to death that night on Christmas Eve of 1865. And so that would have made Samuel Singleton was born in November 1859. He would have been 6 years old when his father died on this tragic evening on Christmas Eve of 1865. Well, you can imagine back then, the kids of the family have forced them into being their dad, being an adult situation. They had to help provide for the family. And that's what Samuel did as he was growing up. He also worked for local sheepmen and ranchers there in the area in American Fork. And since without a father, the kids had to take on the duties of their dad at a young age. So it was his experience with sheepmen and cattlemen, it led him to go to work for a sheepman in Salina Canyon. He went there to be the cook for the people take care of the sheep in the sheep herd. And that's what he started at, but then he eventually started working for some of the local cattlemen in the Salina area. And he worked for $25 per month doing this work. And so previous jobs had taken Samuel through Castle Valley, or now Emery County, our area, home area here. And so he got to know some of the people in this area. So this led him to accepting a job for Mike Mullen, who was a cattleman in the Ferron area. And at this job, he worked for a cow and a half a month. And that was equal to the $25 a month he had been making previously. So by doing this, this established him in the cattle business in the area. So as you know, many of the features on our mountain are named after the first local settlers. So how many's heard of Singleton Flat? How many's been there? All right. That area was named after Samuel Singleton, because that's where he would run his cows in the summer. And there were remnants of an old cabin there, some logs and a little foundation. If you drive by there, you could look for that. It might still be a few logs around, not many. But anyway, that was one of the things that he did in the area. So that's a picture of Sam Singleton.
How old was he when he came to Ferron?
That I don't know exactly. I would say maybe his late teens, early 20s, about that age. So this is a picture of Sam Singleton and his wife Clara Bell Lowry. So Clara Bell Lowry was from Manti, and so they got to know each other in late 1870s. So she was the half-sister of Eunice Lowry Mullen, Mike Mullen's wife. She was the half-sister of his wife. So Clara Bell would come to Ferron to stay with her sister during the summertime a lot. And then also Samuel would stop by in Manti when he was on his way back to see Clara Bell, when he was on his way back to American Fork to visit his mom. And so they kept in touch and knew each other. And over the course of 4 years of knowing each other, then they were married. And she was 21 years old when they were married. And so this is a picture of their marriage picture at that time. And so they settled in Ferron and lived there. And many challenges and opportunities awaited anyone who would accept them in a pioneer town. And leadership was one of Samuel Singleton's outstanding characteristics. His advice on business, farming, or private matter was always sought by the men of the community and county. When there was anything to organize, he seemed to be the instigator. And Samuel was the first mayor of Ferron City. That's why Ferron City has this picture there, which I borrow from there. He was the first mayor of Ferron City. He organized and started a bank in the area. And then he was approached by the Bishop of Ferron to organize a co-op store, which they had done in many of the pioneer settlements. So he was given $250 to buy goods at ZCMI warehouse to stock the store. So when he arrived, he could see that $250 was nowhere near enough money to buy the things he needed to buy for the store. So he often said, "I was sent to buy a bill of goods with an egg in each pocket." Well, he debated what to do, but after he had just sold his fat steers for the year, and he had $1,600. So he used That's $1,600 to buy the goods to stock the store when he started out. And the first year was very successful. The co-op paid a 25% dividend. So at that time, Abe Conover was a stockholder, and the store was now known as the Singleton and Conover Co-op. Well, I've got something to pass around here for you. So they use this script as money for customers to pay for their goods at the store. And at the time, like I said, it was known as the Singleton and Conover Co-op. So on this script, it says Singleton Conover. So I'll pass this around if you want to take a look at that. Well, let's see, what is there? There's $5, $1, 50 cents, 25 cents, and 10 cent script. Pardon?
Explain more about what the script was when they bring their stuff in.
Yeah.
How did that work?
So this script, I think many early businesses made that, and it could only be used at that store that issued it. And so in the early days of the store, customers, they could bring in goods that they had raised and trade it for script or credit at the store. Eggs, butter, vegetables, I think grain was used to trade at the store at the time. So the store, it was stocked with many household items. It wasn't just a grocery store. They had a lot of the goods that people would need in their household. And you can imagine at that time, travel was more difficult. They didn't have Walmart to go to. So the local stores tried to stock all the items that people would need. And I think in one of these two books, it talks more about that and describes the inventory that they had. And I think as I was reading, they were even an implement dealer for International Harvester for the farmers, and provided equipment and things the farmers needed. So actually, let me show you. There's a couple pictures of the store here. That's one of the early pictures. And I think I read the first store burned down after 6 years or so, and then it was rebuilt. So I believe that was one of the store after it was rebuilt. And here's also a picture, and you can see in the window, in the glass there's items that was for sale there. And this is a picture of the store. It had to be a little bit later in years because the Ferron post office was there. And that building is now Desert View Credit Union, where the post office used to be. But you can see the car from the cars. That had to be in the early 1960s, or you older folks, what do you think? So there's an interesting story if I can see where I'm at here. So you can imagine they had various visitors come to the store, and one day Butch Cassidy came visiting the store. And that day, Sam had just got a new cowboy hat that he was wearing, and Butch Cassidy walked in the store and he says, "Hey, that's a nice hat there." And he took Sam's hat off, put it on himself, and put his old hat on Sam's head and left. But also, Samuel's daughter Elva worked at the store, and one day she was taking some money to the bank, and she saw Butch Cassidy walking up the sidewalk, so she ran off and hid in some bushes until she could tell that he was gone. She didn't want to take a chance that he was going to take the money from her. So then after numerous years, several years of operation, Samuel Singleton purchased the stock from the other members, and he became the sole stockholder of the store. So this is a picture of Sam and Clarabelle in their older years. So throughout the years, the store stayed in the family, and so my grandfather, Morris Samuel Singleton, and his wife, May, ran the store after Samuel was done, I guess. And they ran the store for a lot of years. And a lot of people may have the memories of Morris and May. Grant and Lee could probably tell me more. But they were known to try to accommodate many people who visited Ferron. Anyone that needed help that came to Ferron, they offered a bedroom, a place to stay for someone that needed it. And in the early days, they provided a room for young school teachers that would come to Ferron to teach school. They would, in the house that I live now, there were 4 bedrooms upstairs, so they would provide a room for the teachers to live in as they came to Ferron. And I've also been told that my Grandpa Morris, he used the upstairs of the store to build caskets for people. So Morris and May, they also had raised many boys. Say some boys that had lost their family, they took them in and raised them. And one that I remember was Max Acey. Lee remembers that name, probably Grant.
Went to school with him.
Okay. Well, he was raised by my grandma and grandpa, Morris and May. And so then as they became older, my dad's sister, my Aunt Phyllis, and her husband Gerald Stanton took over operation of the store. And Gerald was from Santaquin, and he had come to Ferron to work with the CCCs. That's how he came to Ferron. They got to know each other and were married. And they ran the store for many years and until in the mid-1970s. And this is a picture of the store when they were running it. So one of the things that I remember of my Aunt Phyllis and Gerald running the store, Gerald was a butcher, and in the very back they had a meat case and a butcher table there, and he would cut the meat that they sold in the meat case there, and you could go in the back and you'd watch him cut meat, and they had it displayed in the meat case. And from what I've read, they said he was very particular, kept the place clean and tidy, and ran a very tight ship on the meat store there. Yes. Okay.
You are very right. Gerald was very particular. But he put things out for sale, and Phyllis would come in and have us change it. But the store, like you said, had everything in it. One part of it was clothing, one part was the meat flat, the other part was groceries. And upstairs was, like you said, odds and ends for, like a department store, like a.
Yeah.
But I worked from 1961 until the summer of 1965.
Okay.
During my school years. And I also stayed at your grandpa's house because I lived out to Moore. And sometime my kindergarten teacher was staying with your grandma and grandpa, May and Morris. And so sometimes I would stay there after school because they had a daughter in kindergarten with me. I mean, she did, the kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
Talked about teachers living there. She did, and I stayed there with her daughter.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So I was just going to share, there are many local ladies that worked in the store, and in one of the books, it lists several names: Nellie Bailing, Ida Bohannon, Leola Jensen, Elizabeth Olson, Minnie Thomas, Verda Rasmussen, Roma Nordell, and Louise Funk are some of the ones that worked there. If any of you remember any of those names, Lee and Grant, you should.
That was my mother.
Your mother. Cool.
Okay.
And Martin Beach, his mother worked there.
My mom, Janet Stevens, did for 11, 12 years.
Yeah.
Used to work with Kyle. And after she passed, remember, they'd say they didn't know how to cook the chickens. And that's only because they didn't want to roast the chickens, so me and you got to do it. I still remember the phone number.
Oh,
Tell me if this is right, 384-2610.
that sounds right.
I was working and finding the little kids who you called. And I remember your grandma May calling up, and she'd just say, "This is Grandma, I need milk and eggs." So we'd just go, "Grandma's on the phone." It was like everybody's grandma. So we'd gather it together and somebody would take it over to her.
Yeah, thank you.
Family.
And I also remember Lorene Jensen from Emery worked there during my years in junior high and high school. That's when I remember the store.
And your Aunt Bertha worked there too.
Uh-huh. Okay. Now I think I can share a little story that I have lunch with Cash and Ryan Wynn quite a bit. And Cash was going to come, but he didn't show up tonight. So So maybe I can tell a story on him that he told me today. He said at one time he remembers going into the store, and as he was checking out, he had taken a yellow yo-yo off the shelf and put it in his pocket, and he didn't pay for it and walked out. So we get him from shoplifting a yo-yo out of the store. That was funny. Basically, that's about all I've got with Phyllis and Gerald, and I don't know the exact years, maybe the late 70s. Phyllis and Gerald sold the store to Ray Morley, if anybody remembers him, and they ran the store until it was closed, I think in the mid-1980s, if I remember right. I don't know the exact year, but store was closed and basically been closed ever since.
Who stayed open the longest, Ferron or Singleton's?
I think Ferron was open after they closed. Yeah, so is there any other comments or questions that people might have? Appreciate the comments that we've heard so far. Mike?
Do you know when Samuel started it, what year?
I don't recall the year. It's probably in one of those books. But I really don't know.
Okay, another question along with that. It was mentioned that the Ferron was just 2 doors down there on the corner.
Yeah.
It seemed like those 2 stores were very prosperous. My recollection was that they were both very prosperous. The question to you is, how could 2 stores in a small community like that exist and prosper over, 50, 60 years?
Probably different definitions of prosperous.
Well, they stayed in business and provided, the basic necessities.
Nobody just took off the price like they do now. They had local stores, so they stayed in the area.
Probably didn't sell a lot of the same stuff also.
Everything.
So anyway, that's about all I got, and so I appreciate being able to share this with you, and hope it's been informative and a little bit entertaining. Thank you.
We're going to turn our attention next to the northern end of the county. Ed Geary is going to be presenting presentation here on the history of the flour mills in the county, particularly the Huntington Roller Mills. I just want to mention a couple of things about Ed. He is unofficially our county historian.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that. There was one across
In the first
street
place,
from
he's
our-
lived most of that time, a lot of the history of the county here.
Me and Orange Seeley grew up together.
And secondly, what he hasn't lived, he studied. Ed knows more about the history than anybody else, and the fascinating thing about it is that he can remember it. He's a walking encyclopedia of the history of Emery County and also of Utah as well. As many of you know, he has many academic accolades. He was a professor in the English department at BYU. He was Associate Dean of the College of Humanities and Arts there, and he was a prolific author, particularly dealing with our area here. His books on Goodbye to Poplar Haven, Poplar, Goodbye to Poplar Haven, about his growing up in a small community of Huntington. The Proper Edge of the Sky, talking about the communities here in southern Utah, their culture and the establishment and the prospering of those. And then finally, the history of Emery County. This was the Utah Centennial History Series, and Ed was commissioned to write this for Emery County. And this is a gold mine of information and history that we have here in the county. And so we appreciate him being here and being able to share his knowledge and understanding of our county with us. Tonight he's going to be talking about the Huntington Roller Mills and broaden that to a history of the flour mills here in the county and the essential nature that they have been to our development. So Ed?
I appreciate the presentation we've had on the Singleton Store and the family. Throughout the communities of Emery County, there have been, from the beginning, and it hasn't ended yet. Some people kind of stand out as community builders, and I think it's important to bear these people in mind and appreciate what they have done to make the comfortable world that we're able to live in. Sam Singleton, the first, was certainly one of those people, and I'm talking a little bit about the flour mills. When the Huntington Mill was established, most of these mills were cooperative organizations, but a co-op doesn't work unless there's a leader. And when they decided it was time they needed a mill in Ferron, it was Sam Singleton and John Lemon who took the lead and organized other people, and so that's a good example of, and we have those people, and we've trying in the Historical Society to appreciate them and let people know more about them. We had a presentation not too long ago about the Peacock family in Orangeville, again pioneering store operators there. It's been probably 15 years since we had a presentation on the Wilburg Resort. We probably have a new generation that needs to hear something about that, but we are trying to do that. And I'd have to say, there's something that needs to be done in Ferron about the 4 Lowry sisters who were absolutely central. Eunice Molen, Clarabelle, we heard about. What was Hiram Nelson's wife? His name, I can't think of her name. And then Tan Crawford's wife also was a Molen sister. And they were powerful women. Eunice Molen lived to be more than 100 years old, and in her late years she wrote quite a lot about her history. And she told one story about when they first came to Ferron, in the first Ferron Ward, Mike Molen was one of the counselors. And she remembered an early stake conference. They gathered together, and there was a visiting apostle from Salt Lake going around and getting acquainted, and he came up to Mike Molen and says, "Well, Brother Molen, where's your other wife?" And Mike said, "I don't have another wife." And Eunice said, "And if he did, he wouldn't have me." So just a little view of it took strong men and strong women to make the society that we know now. The story of civilization is the story of the cultivation of grain. It's when people began to learn you could plant grain, you could cultivate it, you could improve the varieties and stocks, that people were able to accumulate enough food to have a civilization. Grains were something you could store, they would last a long time, and something you could fall back on times of difficulty, and so it would support people in a way they couldn't survive with hunting and gathering. So grains are the staple of civilization. There are different staple grains throughout the world. In this country and in Europe and in the Middle East, wheat was the staple grain. And again, it has meant a great deal for us. The people here old enough to remember the time when we lived on bread in this county. My mother had a small family. She only had to bake bread twice a week. But I had friends whose mother baked every day and 6 or 8 loaves every day. And I remember my grandmother, we went to her house to eat. Whatever we were eating, including potatoes and gravy, she would say, "Now you have some bread with that." Because bread was the way you made the other food stretch out longer, the staple. And it's gone. Go into the grocery stores now and go where the baking supplies are and see how much counter space is given over to them. And it'll be about like this, and maybe several shelves high. And if there's flour for sale, it'll be a 5-pound bag or a 10-pound bag. Kendall Mortensen was reminding me the other day that his parents ran a store in Emery, a cafe and store combined, small operation. But every week when the delivery truck from the Huntington Flour Mill came to Emery, they would stack 50-pound bags up this high. And by the time they came the next week, they were gone and it was time to stack them up again. So the milling industry was an absolutely essential part of the development of this valley. And probably the person who needs to have the recognition as the key first figure was Samuel Jukes of Orangeville. He had both a grist mill, a burr mill, the type of grinding it did, and a sawmill in Fountain Green. And he ran them on the water that came down from the springs west of town, which wasn't a very large supply. And so when he was looking at coming to Castle Valley, he thought about Orangeville and the creek that comes down that canyon, and said, well, there's the place to build water mills. So he brought both his sawmill and his burr mill over and set them up on the side of the creek about where the mill dam is now. And that was the first mill in Castle Valley. And before that, if you ran out of flour, you had to go to Salina or Manti to buy another bag. And of course, in the wintertime, when you couldn't get across the mountains, people would go hungry because they couldn't get flour, and that was the only real staple food they had. So when the Jukes Mill was first established in Orangeville, that was a very welcome resource. Interestingly, he also apparently brought the first threshing machine to the valley. So you could, before that, you had to go out and cut your grain by hand and shock it up and everything, and thresh it out by flailing it. And now he had a machine that would do that work. And people came from everywhere on this side of the mountain to get their wheat milled at Orangeville. And it would take, if you were coming from Emery, in a slow teaming wagon. It took you the better part of a day to get there. Then you had to wait in line while other people's grain was milled, so that might be another day or two that you're camped out in your wagon, and then you finally have your flour and you drive back home. Takes another day, and they were glad to do it because it was so much more convenient than what they had had before. Well, the progress was quite rapid in those days because people found better ways to do things. And so Samuel Jukes and his boys looked at that if they diverted the water up by the mill dam and ran it along that hill that's northwest of Orangeville, you could get it to where you could have a mill race that the fall of it could give it a lot more power to turn the water wheel that ran the mill. And so they built then the mill there's a picture of it in this thing that's coming around, the Orangeville mill that was on the side of the hill. And that was in operation until about 1930. But in about 1920, John Taylor was the owner of the mill at that time, and electric power hadn't yet come to Emery County. But people knew about it. And so he figured that he had this water coming down his mill race all the time, and so he would run the milling machines in the daytime, and then when the sun went down, he would use that to power a generator. Lines went to most of the houses in Castledale and Orangeville, and as people got electrical appliances, it was a little bit tricky. Which electrical appliance do you think was most popular? Washing machine. They'd have a washing machine in the window of the co-op store here in Castledale, and if you wanted to make a real impression on your wife, you take home a washing machine. And there was no such thing as a plug. You had to wire that washing machine into the power line, and then you could only wash at night, and then they decided, well, they would run the electricity on Mondays also, because Monday was the wash day, and you could do it there. So pretty soon the demand for power grew, so they stopped milling grain there, and ultimately then sold out to Utah Power and Light, and it got the contract for serving this area. In a few years after the Orangeville mill, I think the second mill to be established was probably at Emery, or actually not at Emery, but at the mouth of Muddy Creek Canyon. And the only information I'd be able to find about that is one sentence in the DUP Castle Valley book in 1949. It tells the man he was a sawmiller from Sanpete County. He brought a grist mill in and set it up in the canyon, and the comment is that the people were very, very glad to have it. I don't know how long it lasted, but you can still go up there above where the canal diversions were and see the remains of the waterworks that were used to run that mill. Next, the Seeley brothers, Orange and Wink, Wellington, joined together to establish the Eagle Flour Mill, which was down here at the end of, 3rd East, probably, south end of 3rd East, where it dead ends. And there's a picture of that there as well. And that operated until, I think, about 1935. Had several owners in the later years, and it burned down. And I mentioned in the handout a story my Aunt Rose told me. the flour, of course, would come in these nice bags, and you couldn't waste that cloth. And so I remember all of my mother's dish towels and most of her pillowcases were flour sacks. But the thrifty ladies of Castledale decided they could use flour sacks to make underwear for their daughters. And the difficulty is that it was called the Eagle Flour Mill, and so the flour sacks had printed on them a big spread-winged eagle there. And apparently that was in absolutely indelible ink. So you might have an eagle on your dish towels or an eagle on your pillowcases, but the little girls at the Castledale grade school liked to go on the tricky bars where you'd do some somersaults at recess time, and the little boys would line up. Their favorite comment is, "I seen your eagle." So there are all kinds of things that can go here. The mill that was in operation for the longest period of time, almost 100 years, was the Huntington Flour Mill. I grew up. I say there were two things that made life worthwhile when I was a kid. One was we had a canal running through our front yard, and the other is the mill was just up the road. And there were no ends of interesting things that you could do there. So I grew up with that mill, and then when I was in high school, I would work there on Saturdays and occasionally in the summer. So I got a little bit acquainted with Willard Sandberg, who was operating it at that time, and that too has a remarkable history. And it's the only mill, of course, that is still standing. On the back page, there are some pictures of the operations as they are now. So those will be coming around, and I can get you some more. These operations also affected agriculture. When I was a boy, close to half the acreage in Emery County farms was in grain crops. Now you have to look to find any at all. It's almost all hay, for livestock. So the availability of the market through the mills affected what the farmers would grow, and these things created a kind of dynamic thing that built up the community. It's time for refreshments now, so I'll stop that. But I say I've tried here to give you a kind of picture of what my understanding of that mill, some personal first-hand knowledge and history, and I'd be very happy to tell you what's going on in the pictures at the back as well. So anyway, thank you very much. And do you have a question?
Is that building, you say it's still standing, and I know
It
where
is.
it is, but is it restorable, or is it dilapidated to no return? What do you
Any building is restorable.
do you have enough?
Yes, if you
Well, let's rally and get it done.
get it done as well.
The lumber is fantastic.
Really?
It's
Very high quality.
and the most of the original machinery is still there, and it's
Really?
it's 19th century milling machinery, so it's has a historic value all its own. That's there, and if it were in Connecticut or Maine, of course, it would be a restaurant or a fancy restaurant or something. Now you don't let a historic building go to waste.
In Ferron, we have Millside Reservoir,
Mhm.
so there was a mill there.
Right there, yep.
That had to be early.
It was early. There was the mill that Sam Singleton and John Lemon organized, and it was I think about 1897, so on the late side, but they'd learned from what the others did. The big problem with the water-powered mill is how do you run it? A mill's busiest time is going to be in the late summer and fall when the harvest is done. What happens to our streams before we had reservoirs in the late summer and fall? They shrink. So how do you make the mill work? What they did in Ferron, and there's actually a monument right on the site. If you want to go up there by below Millsite Dam, you can see where the actual location was. And they took the water out up toward the upper end of what's now the reservoir there. So they had 100-foot fall in the pipe coming down to the mill. And it was above the canal diversions, so they had the entire stream. So the boast at the Ferron mill is we can run our entire operation at any time. The convenience to the power, of course, meant an inconvenience to town because it was 3 miles away to go up to there. The Huntington Mill was right at the edge of town, very conveniently located, but it didn't have enough water to operate. And they eventually put a steam engine in. And then when the Sandbergs came, and the Sandberg family ran the mill for 50 years during its most significant time, the first thing they did is pay Utah Power and Light to build a line so they could have electrical power at the mill.
When I was a young lad, there was a flour mill in Ferron on State Street 100 South.
Right.
I
And
think
that
it
was
Kilpack.
Llewellyn Kilpack. Llewellyn Kilpack was the last miller up at the mill site mill. And when he shut that down, he moved some of the equipment down into town. And I don't know how much flour he made. It was mostly a feed mill, I think, when it came down into town. But it continued, I don't know, long time down in Ferron.
Let me just relate a thing along with that. Gene Fulmer ran that mill when I was growing up, in my generation there. And he had a sign in there that says, "A credit manager is Helen Get It. If you want the credit, go to Helen Get It."
There you are. Well, thank you very much. And I think we've got some refreshments at the back.
Did
And
we have some homemade bread? Now you made me hungry.
well, take your wife a bag of flour.
There you go.
There you
Start
are.
getting me to work.
My dad used to sell bread over
That's true. He did. He was.
and I used to remember Jay Powell would come in like the thrifty with the big sacks of
Yep, that was the flour.
and then it's kind of died off. But noticing bread prices nowadays, I think the most expensive loaf was like 25 cents.
Yeah, it
And
was.
now Grandma Sycamore's is how much? $4 or $5 a loaf.
Yeah.
Could you just go through the succession of owners there in the Huntington Roller Mill?
Yes. Okay. It was organized and it began milling in 1892, and in 20 years it went through 13 operators, and so that turnover plus the problem with powering made it functioned, it served the community well, but it was kind of shaky. When Olaf Sandberg was a Swedish immigrant who came down to Washington in Washington County as a young boy from Sweden. In adolescence, he worked. There was a mill at Washington the town of Washington that was owned by Erastus Snow, who was the presiding apostle in that area. And so he learned the miller's trade there, and then he worked at various mills, and he decided he didn't want to work for wages, he wanted to be his own boss. So he's finally able to buy a mill in Sanpete County. What's the town straight across from Ferron? Mayfield. At Mayfield. And it was very successful. This was in 1909, and the forest had just been established, and that whole face of the mountain there was nothing growing on it. And so when the thunderstorms would come, the torrents would just come down and go through the towns, do all kinds of damage. And the canal he used to bring the water to his mill would fill up with boulders. And that happened 3 times in 3 months in one summer. So he began to look for another mill to buy. His wife was a briner, and she had relatives living in Price. And so they found out there was a mill for sale in Huntington, and they came, and they, as I say, Ole and then his son Willard together operated it for 50 years, and were very successful at that. Then when Willard retired, then Jay Powell, who had been working at the mill for about 10 years, he bought it then and continued on with his sons. And then, of course, Jay was killed in an accident, and his son carried on for a while, and then it ceased to operate.
So they were the last ones?
They were the last ones to operate it. And it was the Powell family who made the push to get the mill on the National Register of Historic Places in view of its historic importance to this area. Well, if you have any questions, you can just, I'm happy to talk with you, but we can